just another vlog, an off the cuff vlog. Today is the 18th, Monday 18th of April 2022, and we wanted to discuss. We wanted to pick up from last time and discuss ego theory, übermench, and the perfect superegoic self. Now, the question I left myself with yesterday was, what makes my concept of the ideal self more correct than other people's, and is there even a correct conception of the perfect moral self, the superegoic self, the what you want to be. Now, I wrote this pretty much straight after I made my 30-minute vlog yesterday because I was in the kind of a thinking flow state. So that's that. And I wrote that I started with what I consider to be my perfect self, because that lays a good groundwork of for how we should, what it lays a good groundwork for how much variance I will allow for the perfect self. Like what would I say is a acceptable conception of the perfect self, and what is not. I mean, like, initially what I think is that the perfect self cannot conform to her mentality, cannot get its moral values and its ideal of the perfect being from following the herd or from society. Like, if you did that, then you'd simply fall into the rat race and just make a bunch of money, and that's apparently moral, according to capitalistic society nowadays. And so what I did first was I listed out the things that, with what I know, are, or I think are, things that would make me a perfect so the things that my super ego wants, what I want to be, essentially. So my conception of the übermensch would be, I wrote, it involves self-control, obviously, very important. Health, good health, physically and mentally, and ideally lives without excessive material good, or consumptions of excessive material good. Also, it's important for me to both consume, understand, and create good art. What else did I write? Yep. My perfect self would always think consciously rather than letting my mind run. What's the word? Run wild. Right. But yeah, like, I wouldn't let my mind go. Get lost in thought, essentially. I wouldn't want to get lost in thought as a perfect being. I'd always have either consciousness of my senses, so mindfulness, but like consciousness of experience and experiencing the sense data in its fullest, like being present in the sense data in the moment, or applying the noise in your mind or in my mind to utilize it in some way that's beneficial for myself and towards my ideal übermensch self. I also wrote that in regards to the good art part, it involves a deep expression of emotion, and I guess the human experience also comes part and parcel with that. I also watched a bit of more of an Indian mystic dude on YouTube, and he said something about, he said, either you are conscious or you are compulsive. which I thought, could that be first and second order thinking, where first order thinking is similar to just being immersed in your thoughts, and second order thinking or awareness is awareness of your thoughts and controlling your thoughts with thoughts and being conscious but not absorbed in your first order thoughts. And so I think that's also a very important part of my conception of the übermensch. Also, when coming into contact with that content, personally, I kind of rekindled a spark in my mind about identity, and I think I did talk about this yesterday, but essentially, identity limits. Having an identity as a human being, as a conscious being, merely serves to, well, it doesn't merely serve to, but it serves to, detrimentally serves to limit ideas and beliefs. Because, or I guess the acquisition of new beliefs and learning and kind of growing as a being. So kind of what I'm saying is that if you have a strong sense of identity, and you identify with certain movements and brands, then you're not free in the ways you need to be free to become an übermensch, in my mind, to kind of find truths of the self and of the world. So yeah, so having that sense of identity limits exploration of the human experience, which I find to be very important, because that is pretty much all you are born with. You're not born with cultural and social implications, right? Expectations, implications, and ideas, but you are born with the human experience. So it seems to me that that is more valuable, because again, my concept of value is that it's useful or applicable in most in as many situations as possible, and in as many situations as possible as a human, you're going to have a human experience, and thus the exploration of that is always valuable in my mind, or at least for me. And I don't really know what you'd say to argue against that. I mean, you could just not be human, which doesn't matter. Like, in that case, it doesn't matter because you're not human. And you wouldn't have a conception of I anyway. And then I thought, regarding the übermensch, I'm willing to accept. Okay, so actually, having thought of all of this about what I think is the perfect self, or the super egoic self for me, I'm willing to let some things, or to set some criteria for what should be what your ideal self should be. And the first condition is that it is not limited by identity, because again, having that identity limits the exploration of things that you do not know and do not accept. Say that you do not accept a certain political stance, or you don't accept a particular identity in your hobbies or whatnot, then you'll be able to have a broader perception and explore the competing concepts or ideas or brands or identities. If you've always been a Toyota guy, for example, and you keep buying Toyotas, you never know what other cars feel like, and you never have that experience. But if you have a more open mind and you don't identify with the brand, then you'll be able to try a lot more cars, if that makes sense. And that then you could apply that to a whole lot of shit. I mean, if you've always been I guess in technology, you've always been an Apple guy, then you'll never experience the joys that other brands have to offer. And if you've always been a proponent, or someone who prefers a certain flavor of, like, for me, I only drink oolong milk tea when I order at boba shops. I mean, I don't exactly identify with it, but let's say I did, then I'd only try it and I wouldn't be able to try other things, which is also true. So you can see how identity or identifying with things limits your experience. It stops you from exploring your options and exploring ideas. And it applies to a much greater level than when compared to, fucking milk tea flavors and car brands and your choice of mobile phone. It applies to how you live your life. And if you identify as a Christian, for example, and I'm not a big fan of religion, but when you identify with a certain pattern of thought or a certain, what do you call religion? It's a school of thought. Then you will never be able to find the truth or get closer to the truth because you limit your exploration and understanding of other things that you could find out are more true than the things you know in the present. So yeah, that's one of my criteria for becoming the übermench, for becoming the ideal self, or the ideal self itself. So in other words, to be an ideal self, you must not conform to, or you must not identify with things, and as the part of that, you must not conform to the ideals of other people, because you live for yourself, right? Just because you're born, in a country, so say I'm born in Australia, just because you're born in and you grow up in a certain country, does not mean that your values are more correct, or the values that Australia imposes on you are more correct than the values that someone in China would experience or adopt because from the fact they live in China. So it seems that it's very important to not take that at face value, to not just take these values and follow them perfectly, because you won't get closer to the truth that way. You won't find other value systems that exist in other countries, and you won't be able to consider what is best. So A, don't identify. B, don't conform, because that's just a form of identification of self. And that brings me to cynicism, which kind of encapsulates both of those ideas I've just talked about. Basically, if you're cynical, in other words, you don't believe everything you see. You have a seething doubt for everything. You doubt everything in the pursuit of truth. You don't take knowledge from people, or you don't take values from people just because. And you have to, and it's a kind of philosophy of finding things out for yourself, rather than following the herd, because again, the herd limits, and so cynicism. I think I could put all of what I just said under the umbrella term of cynicism. You need to be deathly cynical of everything you know, because it allows you to continue challenging what you think you know, what you think is true, and kind of develop your view on the world, or your knowledge, as high as possible, or as greatly as possible. And I think that's good. I think the more you know, the more you're able, the better you're able to develop your worldview and your values, and you know that you're doing better. You already know in many ways that you're doing better than everyone else, because you're not merely following their morality, or what they're doing in life. So as you can see, like, most people do that, and so most people don't have a strong super egoic self. They don't really have anything of their own to work towards. So most people in society have this goal that's given to them. I'll give you most people I know, at least, they're given the goal of making a bunch of fucking money and getting as rich as possible, which is the kind of capitalist social ideal, which is something that's projected onto them. It's not something they decided for themselves. So you can see how that's a bit problematic, because that doesn't seem to be really helpful. It's like, would you be more satisfied completing a goal set by other people or by yourself? For me, at least, it would be set by myself, because not only can I take pride in the completion of the goal, but I can also take pride that I decided to do this, and I had the courage to take a different path, or take a path at all. So a lot of the strain and stress and pressure and cognition actually comes from deciding where you're going to go. So the direction you're going to take on a journey, and then takes all the power to walk the journey. And so I think that if you let someone choose the direction and you just walk in a straight line, then you will never feel as satisfied, and you'll never have as great as a life, or as great of a self, as great of a conception of the perfect self than someone who decides the direction for themselves, who is cynical of social norms and social moral values. So yeah, I think as long as someone's ideal self follows that one criteria, that is overarching cynicism, I can safely say that your concept of the super egoic self, the übermench, is as great as anyone else's who also follows that. And so, and that's what a good ideal self should be. And whatever that self decides is good would be good, because morality is subjective, and what is good is subjective, as long as it's done by yourself. And that raises all sorts of questions. What if someone comes to the conclusion that the most moral thing is killing everyone? And it's a bit problematic. Like, let's take a bit of a controversial case, but let's think about Hitler. Say Hitler came to the conclusion that he should kill Jews independent of his social context. Well, first of all, that raises the problem. I don't think he did, because this was a time where I know very little about world history, and much less than I know. But as far as I know, after World War One, Germany was in a lot of pressure to pay reparations, and there was I think a pre-existing anti-Semitism kind of already existed. There was a pre-existing anti-Semitism which Hitler kind of took advantage of. So he didn't really found his values off of cynicism. He never critiqued that idea, and he just kind of used it to benefit himself, to become more powerful, as Nietzsche's will to power would suggest. That is not self-mastery, that is not power over the self, but it's power over other people, which is kind of dangerous. So I guess that's another criteria I could add to it. That is that the power one seeks in becoming an übermensch is not power over other people, but power of self. Because it becomes real problematic when it becomes power over people, because then your sense of morality applied to other people is a bit bad. Imagine if I applied my sense of morality to everyone. That is that all, in a bit of an exaggerated case, but if I say that we should get rid of all technology, if I apply that to everyone and people who like their technology, then there's a bit of a problem, especially if those people who prefer to keep certain parts of technology around are also on the cynical, or have this cynical mindset that allows them to have a good conception of the perfect self. So yeah, I don't think forcing one's moral standards, one's standards of the perfect self onto other people is any good at all, because again, it is all subjective, and again, having influence exerted on your moral beliefs is also not helpful to the übermensch project, if so to speak. So yeah, so that's why I don't think you should really have the goals of your perfect self as power over other people, but rather power over self and the things you do to yourself, or the things you do yourself. For example, for me, I like to make art. I like to write poetry and take photos. The instant that these things become for other people, I've experienced. The instant I want to write a poem to impress other people, or I take photos to impress other people, it comes a bit shit. I don't appreciate it. I don't like it as much. I don't think it looks as good, or sounds as good, or reads as good. And I think that's for a very special reason, and that's that you should do those things for me are becoming my perfect self. But once I do them for other people, or in light of other people, then it doesn't track well. It doesn't really register in my mind. I feel like I'm not doing it for myself. I stray from being my perfect self. And so I typically, what I do, I found experimentally, or through observation, that my best work comes from doing art for myself. That is, having or writing or creating expression of the deep feelings that I have, and putting them into a poem when I have those intense feelings. And that helps me cope with the feelings, and also helps me to kind of learn more about what I'm feeling. So then I think that kind of makes things hard, because what if your conception of the übermensch is to help other people? And if that is centered on exerting power on other people, then it seems that even if that power is to do good, then it kind of breaks my argument. And so I need to amend it, right? And to do good to other people. What does that mean? I'm sure I want my poems to do good to people, right? To have people relate to them and have an outlet to understand their emotions better through me. Sure, you could argue that, but again, the whole thing with writing poems for myself applies. So does this advocate for selfish altruism? Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? If you derive a sense of fulfillment through like helping others, feeding the homeless, donating large sums of money, for example, or small sums of money, I think it's a bit fallacious or it's a bit sketchy to say that it's actually for other people, rather than admitting that it is selfish. It is a selfish altruism. You say you're doing this to feel good about yourself, but not in the purely selfish way, but in a way that you can't really exert power on other people. You can only do things to exert power. Like, you're only really sure that you are conscious, which again presupposes the entity you. But in a way, you cannot be sure that other people are conscious. You only assume they are. And so and so you can't really completely justify your actions based on doing things for others in a way, or exerting powers on others. But you can justify your actions based on the things you know, like what you know, or the consequences of what you know. So you know that helping others makes you feel fulfilled. So that is good reason to do it. Such that I know, like, for example, I know that writing poetry will make me feel good, so that I'll do it. And that seems to be the only justification, given my model of just life in general. If it all rides on cynicism. Yeah, I think I have to process this a lot harder, because it's not really cohesive towards the end of this video. What I said about selfish altruism, I don't know if it's true. How does selfish altruism link to the übermench, to link to the perfect self, the concept of the perfect self, the super egoic self? It's really hard to say, to be frank. Yeah. Because you could say that because murdering people makes me feel good, then I should do it. No, but that's wrong, because while you don't know that people are conscious, you must assume that they are, despite not knowing. So by induction, in a way, I am conscious. Therefore, it's likely that other people are conscious because they're the same as me. But you cannot deductively prove that they are conscious. So sure, you by assumption, by induction, you can help people, but by deduction, you because you don't know they're conscious, then you can't really help them, and that also applies for killing people, or causing harm to people. Uh, Inductively, you assume they are conscious, so it's not good to murder or to harm them, but deductively, it's not good to harm them. Deductively, it doesn't matter if you harm them or not because you don't know if they're conscious. So maybe you need both a inductive and deductive concept of other people to fully understand, to fully justify your application of power into other people. So, in recap, helping others is good because it, assuming that other people are conscious, what you do is good. Assuming that they're not conscious, then what you do is bad, and you hurt people, then what you do is bad. Wait, fuck. Less conditions. Sorry. More conditions need to be fulfilled, if for murdering to be good. So, for murdering to be good, or not bad rather, people need to be not conscious, through deduction and induction. But it's unlikely. You need to throw away induction to say that murder is not bad, or harming people is not bad. But you don't need to throw away anything for doing good to be good. So yeah, does that make sense? Am I contradicting myself? Because I justified selfish altruism by saying all you know is that it will make you feel good. Deductively, or deductively it'll make you feel is that it'll make you feel good. But inductively it'll make other people feel good as well. I don't know. This is very complicated. What did I even start talking about? What can I accept is a good conception of the perfect self. Perhaps it all comes down to do unto others what you want for yourself. So maybe this all wraps back to Kant and his conception of his idea of the categorical imperative, which basically means if everyone did that, what would happen if everyone did that? If you'd like people to do it to you, then chances are it's moral. Do unto others that you wish other people do unto yourself. And if we apply that moral standard as a guide, kind of a guide to your superego's perfect moral conception of self, then perhaps we can make it work. I think I'm confusing the shit out of myself, so I'm gonna end this 35-minute vlog. Oh my god, what have I done? This is kind of watchable, but I did stutter and stammer and repeat myself multiple times because I wasn't quite warmed up, and now I'm tired. So yeah, maybe perfect time for vlog is 5-minute warm up, 20 minutes of speaking, and then no more. so maybe I'll try to limit myself next time. So thanks for watching. Goodbye.